This is Sawyer Robertson, and you're listening to the Bearcast on SicEm365.com.
Welcome into the Bearcast on SicEm365.com, presented by WellMed Medical Management and Barefoot Campus Outfitter. Head on over to Barefoot Campus Outfitter in Waco or go to the website and use SicEm365 as your code to save 20% off your purchase. Today, I'm here with Colt Barber, and we are going to preview Baylor's matchup against number 21 ranked Cincinnati on the road this weekend. The Bears have another road game after losing to TCU a week ago. We're not going to spend much time talking about TCU or much time talking about, Dave Aranda, at least on this podcast. But this will be a full Cincinnati preview, a big matchup for the Bears, and one that they really need to kind of just try to turn their season around a little bit, or at least take baby steps in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, these are very similar teams. And I say that understanding that Baylor's defense has been significantly worse than Cincinnati's, but really good offenses, play really good efficiency special teams. And the difference is that Cincinnati's defense is ranked about 40 points higher in efficiency defense, or 40 spots higher. And Baylor, as good as their offense has been, continues to turn the football over. And that's, I mean, reality is we can talk about the defense all day long, but you lose ultimately a one-possession game, even though it really wasn't for the majority of that game, but you turn the ball over 4 times and you lose a one-possession game. That's unacceptable for the offense that should be really, really good. And there's so many reasons to discuss that, but that's been the story of Baylor's entire season. So you go into this game, very similar teams in what they're able to do. This is the worst F plus defense that Baylor will face outside of Oklahoma State this year. And then talk about Samford. I mean, that was an FCS team that doesn't count in the F plus efficiency rankings. But this is Baylor's chance to go out and kind of have a semblance of a solid game. I'm not expecting much from the defense. Cincinnati's offense is really good, but maybe you go on the road and win a shootout.
I mean, that's definitely probably going to be the recipe for Baylor if they're going to win this game, because we can talk about Cincinnati's defense being bad. Their offense is really, really good, and Baylor's defense is really, really bad. I think that's the guarantee that we know going into this matchup. And also, you looked at TCU this past week and you felt like it was very much a favorable matchup for Baylor. And then Baylor's just turning the ball over all over the place, can't run the ball. Sawyer Robertson has his worst game in the last 2 years. It just was kind of a baffling performance, and it makes you wonder if that's going to be the trend going forward or if it's just an outlier performance. But I do think at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge the offense has lost them 2 games this year. When you look at the Arizona State game and this TCU game, the defense played well enough for them to win both of those games. I will also fully acknowledge that the offense won them the SMU game for sure. Yeah. But those 2 games, the offense lost those games for them by turning the ball over repeatedly. 7 times in those 2 games. The turnover edge is 7-1 in those 2 specific losses in Big 12 play. That can't happen. But even worse than that, they lost the turnover battle against Oklahoma State. What are you doing? Oklahoma State is obviously terrible. We can make excuses and say, oh, it was the first game after Gundy was gone. That team is awful, and you lost the turnover battle. And then you look at Kansas State. You also lost the turnover battle. I know you got the interception by Jacob Rang that was returned for a touchdown, but you still lost the battle there. They've lost the turnover battle in every Big 12 game this year. Yeah, it's pretty unacceptable, and that's honestly a big part of the reason Baylor is where it is.
Yeah, it is. And two, I want to make sure we talk enough about Bryson Washington still not being healthy. That's for this specific game against a Cincy defense they haven't been honestly tested the way that Baylor will test them this season. If you look across the offenses they faced, Nebraska, Kansas was the one that they were comparable offense, and Kansas put up 600 yards on them. And just moved the ball up and down the field on them. Iowa State, UCF, and Oklahoma State. And so this game is a game that Baylor should move the ball, but I'm really concerned about the running back situation. Michael Turner, Caden Knighton had good enough performances outside of Bryson Washington's fumble, and the running backs played fine, but they just need Bryson Washington. It's just a different dynamic with him at the running back position. And you want to be as balanced as you can against this Cincy defense, because you want to be able to throw to not tight windows with Sawyer. And if they don't trust the run game and they have a good defensive line, depending on if Corleone's fully healthy, I know he's kind of up and down. I don't even have him looked at this particular week, but it's a game that you need all hands on deck. And I just don't know if I trust that Bryson Washington's going to be healthy for this game and for the rest of the season.
I mean, he hasn't been. I don't know why, him getting basically pulled for the second half provides any indication that he's going to be fine, though. I mean, yeah, maybe, but it might have been him getting just smacked on that fumble, and that's what banged him up, because, we know the kind of injury he's dealing with is really a pain tolerance thing. I mean, that's just kind of what it is. And if you are getting hit and fumbling the ball because of that, it kind of points to, okay, maybe you got to go a different direction. So I think that's going to be definitely an interesting storyline to watch for the Bears going forward. Real quick, Sawyer Robertson has something to remind you about.
Want the latest information about your favorite team? Try out Sigum 365 premium content the next 3 months for just $5 by clicking the link below.
And now back to the Bearcast. I do want to start with this, Colt. So as we know, right now Baylor's kind of on the brink a little bit. I mean, they're 4-3. That this season has not gone the way that they hoped. There's still some things to play for. Obviously, if you went out, that's a lot to play for. That doesn't seem realistic. But I went back and looked at kind of Baylor's season kind of teetering on the brink, and they go into a road matchup against a team that's favorite against them. And kind of looking back through the last 3 years, each year there's 2 games where they went on the road, found a way to get a win, found a way to probably not turn around this season, at least when you look at 2023, but found a way to kind of salvage some things a little bit. So in 2022, Baylor went on the road as a 4-3 team against Texas Tech, who was also 4-3, won that game 45-17 as a road underdog. Baylor then traveled the next week to Oklahoma at 5-3 and beat a 5-3 Oklahoma team 38-35 as a 3.5-point underdog. Then you fast forward to 2023. Baylor travels to UCF as a 7.5-point underdog. The Bears were 1-3 taking on a 3-1 UCF team. They won that game 36-35 by just a complete miracle, but they still won the game. Then Baylor traveled to Cincinnati a little bit later that year at 2-4. They were a 3-point underdog against 2-4 Cincinnati. Won that game 32-29. And then, of course, you look to last year, Baylor travels to Lubbock at 2-4. They were a 4.5-point underdog. Texas Tech was 5-1 going into that matchup. Baylor won that game 59-35. And then a few weeks later against West Virginia as a 1.5-point underdog, the Bears at 5-4, beat 5-4 West Virginia 49-35. So my whole point in saying that is you look at this matchup, and right now, Baylor is, I think they're right around a 3.5-point underdog.
Now.
2.5
started
now.
at 5. No, it's 3.5. It started at 5.5 and dropped. I mean, it's dropped through 3 days, essentially. It's pretty crazy.
But this game falls in line with all of those other lines, all of those other numbers, all of those other kind of moments you want to point to. Now, I think most of us were thinking that maybe it happened last week against TCU. Didn't happen. Yeah. They get another chance this week for a similar type situation with, your team's at 4-3. This does feel like a game where you kind of have to figure out a way to win this game. If you do win this game, then you beat UCF next weekend. It's like, okay, there's a little bit of momentum going into November. But I just found that interesting because to me, since they lost to TCU, I've just been kind of sitting back and going, man, this would be the most Baylor football 2025 thing ever for them to lose that game to TCU. Fan base is out. Everyone's upset. How could you get blown out by TCU? And then you turn right around and just probably, pull off some sort of minor miracle and beat a ranked Cincinnati team with a really good offense. It honestly kind of feels like that a little bit.
I mean, you look at it, and I mentioned this about Cincinnati's defense, and I like TCU's defense fine. I think they're athletic and they create havoc. We knew that going into the game, and that's ultimately what they did. And that destroyed Baylor's offense. Not destroyed Baylor's offense, but it challenged Baylor's offense throughout that game. They ultimately put up yards and points, but it didn't matter. Cincinnati's just kind of a different animal. Like it's a defense that is solid, but I don't look at it the same way as I do. And I'm going to pull up some stats here, but I don't look at it the same way that I did TCU's defense. I mean, it's a group that's kind of middle of the road in sacks, actually lower than middle of the road through 4 conference games. They averaged 1.5 sacks per game. TCU's at 2.5, and that's the difference between the number 3 defense and the number 10 defense in the Big 12. And that's kind of like the story of their defense. And Baylor, for the first time this season, going on the road, if they can get a full, solid offensive performance, and I feel like we've been saying this, it's just like, go out and do it, start to finish. They haven't done it at all, and we know they're fully capable, so what is holding them back? And this feels like a spot that maybe it just miraculously comes through for the offense specifically. I'm not like, we can talk about the defense, and we're going to talk about the defense. This offense can go and win them this game. And they're going to have to do it in my mind. They're not going to stop that Cincinnati offense, barring Cincinnati just turning the football over a lot. But yeah, I'm with you. I've had actually a couple texts about it this week. It feels like that. I think the overreaction, if you want to call it that, for Baylor fans in the TCU game specifically, does it tell us more about the Baylor team than we already knew? Not really. I mean, it's kind of, heck, I predicted that game to be 40-37, Baylor winning, and then it's kind of the opposite. And I know that we can talk about the whole thing, but like, that was supposed to be a fairly close toss-up rivalry type game. The way it played out was weird, but maybe we're overreacting to Baylor a little bit in terms of the offense, and they come back and bounce back in the spot. And it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, the history is there of what Dave Aranda has done on the road with his back against the wall.
I think one of my kind of takeaways from the TCU game, if you want to look for just like, hey, maybe there's something there, was just the fact that the defense was bad. I understand that. TCU has a really good offense, and Baylor held them in check through the first half. Now, there was rain, there were some factors, but Baylor at least tried to mix things up, tried to make things more difficult, tried to give their offense a chance to get off to a really quick start. And who knows? I mean, if Baylor goes up 14-0 instead of only 7-0, you just never know kind of how those games then play out going forward. Obviously, they couldn't do it, and that's part of the whole problem with this team. They don't play complementary football, but I felt like the defense really, they showed at least some flashes for stretches of playing
and they've done
decent
it all season.
Football.
Yeah.
And then they showed flashes of horrific football when you look at the second and third quarter where TCU is just scoring at will. I don't know. It's just an interesting thing that I've looked at, because I do think most people agree that game was an anomaly for the offense. And honestly, it might have just been one of those things where it's a bad matchup where you're facing a TCU defense that forces turnovers and they get after the quarterback, and Baylor just wasn't able to match them athletically. And I think in some ways that did happen. They really fooled Sawyer Robertson a lot. He was never comfortable throwing the football, even when he didn't have pressure. He just was not comfortable. I think you expect that to bounce back, and kind of my reasons for that as I look into Cincinnati and the ways that I believe they can be attacked. It really, I think, does come down to Baylor's passing game. It 100% does. The run game is not reliable enough for me to sit here and say that Baylor's going to find a way to get to, 150 yards. I don't think that you can bank on that. I really don't. And so then therefore you have to look at the passing game, and that's going to put a lot on Sawyer Robertson's shoulders. But when you look at Cincinnati, they only have one interception all year. And like you said, they're in the middle of the pack, below middle of the pack in the Big 12, as far as pressures on the quarterback, sacks. They don't get after the quarterback in a crazy way. They like to drop guys into coverage to protect their secondary, which is their weakness up to this point in the season. That's where you have to be able to attack them a little bit in the run game. You got to be able to get, those 4 yards when you're facing a 3-man front. And then you have to be able to at least give them the option of some sort of play action. The other areas that I look at here, they're in the bottom 4 in pass defense, bottom 4 in pass efficiency defense. They're almost last. They're second to last, as they allow a 67% completion percentage to quarterbacks, only ahead of Oklahoma State by 1%. And then they're 80th in the nation in yards per attempt allowed to quarterbacks. I think when you kind of look at all of that, you look at the fact that they haven't forced a lot of interceptions yet, and they haven't gotten after the quarterback yet. That means that Sawyer should have time in the pocket to make throws, go through his reads, hopefully not turn the football over like he did against TCU, and then have an opportunity for success. I think all of those things line up pretty well for him and for this passing game, which, like you said, you think it needs to be good. The offense, I agree with that. They're going to have to put up some points, and Sawyer Robertson is going to have to be the catalyst of that.
Yeah, and throw on here. So Cincinnati's in Big 12 play only, number 16 in the conference with 3.5 tackles for loss per game. So like this is, even compared to Oklahoma State, they played Oklahoma State, who's number 6, TCU, who's tied for number 6, Kansas State, who's tied for number 8, Arizona State, who's number 4. It's a different type of defense that they're playing, and I think it's hard to say because their efficiency defense is good. So you want to give them credit. I'm assuming I'm going to pull it up. I'm assuming their red zone defense is pretty good.
It's incredible. I'm going to get to that in a little bit.
Yeah. So right now in conference play only, they're number 4 in the Big 12 at 50% touchdowns allowed. And Kansas State actually number 1. So comparative there, TCU is number 4. So it's just Baylor's going to have the chance to move the ball between the 20s. And that's when it becomes an issue with the run game if you don't have Bryson Washington. And what are you going to do to be creative? And I was yelling at the TV when Bryson Washington got hit and fumbled in the TCU game. And you know exactly where I'm going with this. Sawyer Robertson's unwillingness to run the football on any occasion where he has a clear lane is devastating to this offense. And it has been this case since the very first game of the season. I feel like in every single podcast that we were discussing this. So when we go down to this particular game, I'm just going to say it again. You get in the red zone, 2-point conversions notwithstanding, like they love to call it on and they called the 4th down call with the empty set against TCU, and he gets stuck behind the line on a 4th down call on TCU side of the field. You can't be situationally unaware. Like those runs have to come at different moments of the game to keep the defense honest, not when they know it's coming. That goes strictly to this discussion of Cincinnati's red zone defense and Baylor's red zone offense. You got to score touchdowns. There's so many times that I want this offense to take points, get the points. This isn't a game where you're going to get the points. Like you got to score touchdowns. Like if you have a 4th down inside the 10, you're probably going to need to go for it in this game. Unless, obviously notwithstanding the situation, timing, how much time's left on the clock for half or whatever it might be. But Cincinnati's going to let you move the ball. And I'm curious of their explosive play rate, et cetera. But you've got to get to the red zone and score points because that's where this game's going to be won ultimately.
Yeah, on the season, Cincinnati is allowing just a 47.8 touchdown percentage in the red zone, which is 2nd in the Big 12, only behind BYU. Also, when we talk about Cincinnati's offense, we're going to get to the red zone as well because Baylor's defense has been terrible in that regard. And Cincinnati's red zone offense is once again 2nd best in the Big 12 behind only Utah in touchdown percentage. So that's definitely something we'll talk to here in a minute. I do want to mention, you talked about Baylor moving the football in between the 20s. And I think that is almost a given that they should be able to do that often in this game. And a lot of teams have been able to do that. But I think when we're talking about this passing game, I wanted to look at kind of the 3 quarterbacks who are most comparable to Sawyer Robertson or most comparable passing attacks that they've played so far this year. And the 3 that I can point to are Kansas, Iowa State, Nebraska. Those are the 3. I think Nebraska averages like 290 yards passing, which I was actually really surprised by on the season. But when I looked at those 3 specifically, here are the numbers that they put up against this Cincinnati defense. They combined for 1,002 yards, 8 touchdowns. So you're looking at roughly, a little over 300 yards, right around 3 passing touchdowns a game in those 3 games between those 2. Daniels also added 55 yards rushing. Rocco Becht added 2 touchdowns on the ground. In total, those quarterbacks combined for 10 touchdowns and only 1 turnover in those 3 games. So, I mean, when you look at it kind of like that, it's one of those things where it's like, man, this really should be an expectation that Sawyer Robertson is somewhere above 300 yards, around 3, maybe more touchdowns. And the biggest thing for him is his completion percentage needs to be around like 64, 65% in this game, which unfortunately has not been a given. And it was way below that against TCU. But honestly, given what we've seen from Baylor so far on offense, given what we've seen from Cincinnati so far on defense in these kind of comparable matchups against these type of passing attacks, it's very favorable for Baylor in this game. It's very favorable for them to move the football. Like you mentioned, I think the red zone offense or the red zone woes that kind of Baylor has had this year, which hasn't been terrible. They're kind of like middle of the pack as far as scoring,
but
in the red
not
zone.
in proportion to what their offense is.
Right.
It's one of those areas like turnovers it drags the production of the offense down. It drags the efficiency of the offense down.
Right. They're at 62.5% red zone touchdown percentage, which is kind of like a little bit of, I think it's right at average, maybe slightly above average in the Big 12. Cincinnati, of course, like I mentioned, second best red zone touchdown percentage defense in the league. So something's got to give there. Baylor has to score points, like you mentioned, but moving between the 20s, I mean, I think Baylor should feel pretty confident that they're going to be able to do that in this matchup. And for the passing game specifically, this has to be a big game. This has to be like your SMU type performance. This has to be kind of like your Auburn performance, but with a higher completion percentage. Like those type of things, you have to have a game like that in my eyes if Baylor's going to win this one.
Yeah. So turnover margin, and I know we're going to keep harping on this because it's been Baylor's biggest flaw. But if you look at conference only, Arizona State, Kansas State are number 1 and number 2 in the league. Baylor's already faced both of those. TCU's number 5. Oklahoma State's 11. Arizona, or excuse me, who's the last one that I'm missing? Is that all the conference teams they've played so far? Yeah. And then Cincinnati's actually number 3. The difference is total gained. Cincinnati doesn't force a ton of turnovers, and it's 4 in Big 12 play. So 4 in 4 games, 1 per game is what they're getting. And you mentioned it, 1 interception, 3 fumbles allowed. They don't take the ball away a lot. You know, it doesn't really set up better for how Baylor plays than this game. And I don't know if it's going to get any better. I mean, Utah actually doesn't force a ton of turnovers in Big 12 play, which is interesting. I think
they're good against the pass.
Yeah, they're a
so is UCF.
Yeah, they're a interesting statistically, but Cincinnati just doesn't do it a ton. So if Sawyer goes out and gives them the ball, you're playing to their weakness, and that sounds really odd, but like it's just like the TCU game. TCU gives up sacks. They turn the ball, and then Baylor gets to 1 turnover at the end. And did they have a sack in that game? I mean, like it's just, I don't know. I mean that's. It seems like the areas that you expect Baylor to exceed in this year, every game it's like they don't figure out ways to excel and against an opponent's weakness. And I don't think it's a game planning deal. I just think it's a team is working on covering those up, and Baylor just can't expose them, and it's very unfortunate.
So to be clear here, when I look at Cincinnati, you mentioned how kind of advanced metrics and things like that, they kind of like Cincy. I mean, kind of in the ballpark of your, SMU, your TCU, like that's kind of where they're sitting. A lot of that is because of what they've done in the red zone. I mean, you look at what they've given up so far in Big 12 play, they're willing to give up yards. I mean, they really are. They're fine with that. They gave up 597 to Kansas, 470 to Iowa State, 413 to UCF, 377 to Oklahoma State. Without a quarterback, was Zane Flores in that game? I don't think so. So no quarterback there. The interesting part to me recently in Big 12 play, because we're talking about this passing game, right? Passing game should be really good in this game. I mean, you're looking at a defense that gave up 274 yards passing and a 78% completion percentage to Bowling Green.
Yeah.
Like that is this defense. But in Big 12 play, it's gotten interesting because they're not stopping the run like they were early in the season. They've given up 150 yards or more in 4 conference games that they've played this year. Gave up 152 to Kansas, 156 to Iowa State, 191 to UCF, and then 228 to Oklahoma State. In total, they're giving up kind of right around like 4.9 yards per carry in conference play. And so I just find that to be really interesting because I don't expect Baylor to be able to run the football very well, but it also seems like Cincy is going to give that to you until you get to the red zone where they're going to kind of stifle up, try to make you kick a field goal, and then turn it over to their offense to go score a touchdown. That's what they've been so good at so far this year. But I do think it's an interesting nugget that, in Big 12 play, they've not been good stopping the run or the pass, really. They've just kind of been bad at both outside of the fact that they got to play Oklahoma State and UCF, who I don't believe are quality offenses.
Yeah, and truly that's what Baylor's tried to do. I mean, to be frank. And it's the unfortunate reality of like, okay, we're going to sacrifice until you get to the 25, the 30, and then we're going to really try to turn it on. Well, Baylor's gotten to that point and they can't do that. And so it makes your stats look really bad. And then you get to the red zone, you're like, all right, this is our opportunity to stop you, and we don't. And that was a big thing with the TCU game. You felt like, all right, you might have a chance. You get down there into the red zone. They don't have a good kicker. You can limit their points. They're going to be more risky, but you can get off the field potentially, and they didn't do it. But yeah, Cincinnati, and you mentioned it, 13th in the Big 12 in yards per carry defense through 4 Big 12 games. And for comparison's sakes, Baylor's number 9 at 4.51. And so that if you feel bad about Baylor's defense, Cincinnati's kind of doing the same thing. I mean, Baylor has opponents have rushed 154 times. Cincinnati's opponents have rushed 153 times. So very comparable. And they haven't really played that strong of offense. I mean, it's very comparable to what Baylor's faced. Obviously, Baylor's played TCU and got absolutely torched, and which is just still baffling to me, all things considered. But I'm really curious defensively if Baylor goes – Dave Aranda maybe throws caution to the wind in this game. Be like, look, we're just going to kind of change up our game plan here. This is what we're doing is not working. We're not generating. I mean, this is hard for me to say. Like, we're not generating pressure. I'm not saying he's not trying to, but are there different ways that you can try? Like personnel wise, you're kind of up a creek at linebacker where you want to bring these guys in, but both of them are the ones that you brought in to do those things are on the sideline with injuries. Do you risk Keaton Thomas in the pass rush more? What are you trying to do? And you would think that you're going to see those things after the bye week. Maybe TCU's offense was just to the point of it didn't matter what Baylor did, since he can be to that area. But if you want to make this game a shootout, if you think you're going to have a chance to win a shootout, then make it a shootout. Make it a true shootout. Be risky with what you're doing. Be aggressive. And you don't want the game to get away from me, but I think you have the offenses versus defensive matchup in this game that you feel pretty good about. And you think that your offense can do it, so maybe you just give them that chance to do it.
Yeah, I just think they're kind of in a tough situation because it's kind of been, why can't they just play more aggressive? Yeah, give up more big plays, but maybe force more turnovers. I just don't know they have the personnel for it.
Yeah.
And that's been the hardest part for me, just kind of sitting back and watching. It's like, yeah, why are they playing 3 safeties? You might as well play more guys in the box to stop the run. But then it's like, okay, but Jordan Dwyer is literally open 2 seconds after the ball is snapped every single play. So it's like, that's not going to work. You're just giving up a touchdown every time. And it's like, I like those. So if you do that, if you don't do that, then Kavorian Barnes is getting, 5-6 yards of carry. And so it's just like, there's nothing they could really do because again, personnel wise, and they're not tackling well enough for that either. I don't really know where they go from here defensively. I really don't, outside of just getting turnover luck. I mean, that literally is the only thing I can point to as, hey, maybe that could change, because right now they're getting blown off the line by a lot of teams, and they're about to face probably the best offense line that they will have faced all year, even better than Auburn. Maybe not as talented as Auburn, but when you look at their PFF grades, when you look at how they've performed this year, I mean, they keep Brendan Sorsby as clean as any quarterback in the nation. Yeah. And then they're also able to move people in the run game. I don't really have much hope that Baylor's going to get much pressure on Sorsby. I don't really have much hope that Baylor's going to be able to stop their run game, in which they have 2 really good running backs in Twee Walker and Evan Pryor, who is probably going to have like a 60-yard touchdown in this game because he's an absolute burner. I just don't know. I can't really point to much in this matchup that really Baylor's going to be able to do schematically that's going to change much outside of just, honestly, guys making plays, which we haven't really seen this year.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that. You lost what were potentially going to be your playmakers. I mean, Carl Williams is still on the sideline. And if you're saying, hey, Devin Turner, Phoenix Jackson, Keaton Thomas, Jackie Marshall, and Carl Williams are your troop, and Devin Bobby your troop, well, that's 3 of 5 that you're saying, hey, these guys might be worth a turnover a game somewhere with those, and then you don't have them on the field. And that is the reality of this, of whatever the reason is that this team just doesn't have that in them right now. And we thought at the end of last year, teams are starting to force turnovers. You're starting to get some of those. I remember at the Kansas game, they forced Jalen Daniels into like what seemed like 10 turnovers, and it wasn't, but he had a really hard day throwing the football. And maybe that just came down to the defensive line and the pressure that they were actually decent at creating last year. I think they're in the top half in the Big 12 in sacks, maybe higher than that. But it's just not coming right now, and I don't expect it to. And that's what I said off the top. You're not going to go in this game and win a game 30-27. Unfortunately, like you're going to have to figure out how to score points. I like that Baylor's had to go for 2 quite a bit because it could come down to, hey, like let's just go and chase some points right here. Let's get out, put a little bit of game pressure, and not that they're going to go out and go for 2 like Oregon does every once in a while on their first touchdown of the game, but you might do that at some point in the game. If you feel like a point could win it late, you might chase one a little bit early if you have a lead to see what happens. But yeah, I'm not banking on the defense doing much. I think it just truly comes down to Baylor's offense playing clean, and if they can do that, they're going to have a shot because since he's going to give up a lot of yards, and if you get into the red zone and you score, that puts a lot of pressure because Cincinnati does not want you to score. Obviously, when they're in the red zone, that's where their strength is.
Absolutely. I did want to look through, just kind of give people an idea of kind of what Cincinnati has on their roster. One thing they did really well this offseason was they kind of hit on the transfer portal. They did a really nice job. They brought in a couple offensive linemen that have really done some big things for them. Obviously, Brendan Sorsby taking this big step forward. He's got 18 passing touchdowns, just 1 interception on the season. He's also great running the football, very athletic, 340 yards, 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He's kind of honestly what we called, Sawyer Robertson a little bit last year, where it's like he's sneaky fast. He'll just run by you at some points. He's a little bit more shifty and a little bit better at breaking tackles than Sawyer is, was. But I think for Sorsby, he's just a load for teams to deal with. And going into last week, 33% of the yards Baylor had given up on the ground came to quarterbacks. Going into last week, that obviously flipped because Hoover doesn't run the football very much. But this is another matchup yet again where Baylor's facing a mobile quarterback who is really, really good, really talented at avoiding pressures. They also keep him very clean. I think they've only given up 1 sack on the entire season. It's been extremely impressive what their offensive line does. I want to reiterate, I think this is probably the second best or the best offensive line Baylor's faced this year. Arizona State has an argument. Auburn has an argument. But since he's been playing at a very, very high level, some of the other guys they got out of the portal, some guys that honestly Baylor kind of took a look at in the transfer portal as well. Jeff Caldwell at receiver, big body receiver, like 6'6". He's got 332 yards, 3 touchdowns. Cyrus Allen, another receiver who's performed really well for them, 345 yards, 8 touchdowns on the season. 8 touchdowns is like, whoa. It's a lot of touchdowns at this point in the season. Also, Caleb Goody, I believe, was also a transfer addition. They got really good tight end in Joe Royer. I mean, this is like, they have so many weapons and they really attack with a lot of different weapons. They got 4 guys with over 300 yards receiving. So very similar to Baylor in the fact that they spread it out. They don't quite have that one guy who's like got an insane amount of yards, but they have a lot of guys who are doing some big things and contributing. And then, like I mentioned, they got the 2 really good running backs with Tui Walker and Evan Pryor. Pryor is the one that scares me more, though, in this matchup because he is the one who, like, Tui Walker is the hammer, but then Evan Pryor is like a hammer. And then he also has breakaway, just complete breakaway speed, game-breaking ability. So lots of weapons, lots of problems here. I see all over the place for Baylor in this matchup. I don't really see any way that they hold Cincy under like 34 points in this game. I don't know that I see a path to them holding them under that unless there's just turnovers all over the place, like an anomaly type game.
Yeah. I mean, the only way is if Baylor figures out how to shorten a game, and you kind of thought they could have done that against TCU a little bit, and then they didn't. Yeah. They did in the first quarter. I mean, I think that you look at the beginning of that game where it was just kind of long extended drives executing down the field. Then obviously it snowballed, but yeah, I mean, the most interesting part for me about Cincinnati is their balance. They don't run the football a ton, but then attempts wise, but they don't pass it a ton either. They're like 60 plays a game in Big 12 plays. So they're just going to, if it's there to take, they're going to take it. They're not going to be a high tempo team from their Georgia time as long as they're within control of the game. And obviously right now they've only lost 1 game this season, and that was Nebraska. Basically a home game for Nebraska on a neutral location. But if you look through, Kansas, 7.44 yards per play, 8 against Iowa State, 6.4 against UCF, 7.1 against Oklahoma State. So it is what it is. I mean, they got a really good offense. And that's why I go back to what I said. If you're going to match this point for point, you have to have that approach going in this. In my mind, you have to have that approach. It's I may want to look at this real quick. I don't know how many field goal attempts that Cincy has this year. I would assume it's not a ton
Their
of field
money.
goals.
They haven't missed this
Well,
year.
yeah, I'm saying how many are they kicking it a lot attempts wise? Yeah, so versus conference, they have 6 field goal attempts. That's number 10 in the Big 12.
It's because they're scoring touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly. So they're gonna get through, and you can't. This is a game like you can't bank on getting stops in the red zone and kicking field. Like you're gonna have to go. You're gonna go for it on 4th down. Fortunately, Baylor's used to that. But I'm from the jump. I feel like you're probably just chasing points in this game. And if you, the good thing is, and not that we didn't know this before, but I think it just solidified now. Just do it. Like just go and chase the points. If you feel like if it's the bare minimum that you're gonna have to score is 35 points, you better figure out how to get to 35 points. You know, like if at the end of the game it's 35 and they scored 45, but you thought the bare minimum was 35, you better be there at 35. You can't just kick field goals or not be aggressive on 4th down, especially when the majority of those opportunities are going to come most likely deep into Cincy's territory because of the way they play defense.
Right. So just kind of reiterating on the red zone stuff and why you shouldn't really expect much from Baylor in that area. Baylor's allowing a red zone touchdown percentage of 68%. That is second worst in the league, only ahead of Oklahoma State, slightly, like barely ahead of Oklahoma State in that area. That is a terrible number. And then you look at Cincinnati, who is scoring a touchdown on 78.5% of their red zone trips. Second best in the Big 12 behind only Utah, who's the only team in the Big 12 above 80% as far as red zone touchdown percentage. It's a alarming number and a number that frankly I do think Baylor, like any field goal that Baylor forces in the red zone is kind of a minor miracle at this point. And if that happens during the game, you should be cheering really loud that just happened, because it has not happened often enough, and it's something that it does not look like it's going to shift in this matchup. Be nice to see just like a little positive momentum there, like 1 or 2 field goals for one field goal for us. We saw last week against TCU, they went 4 for 4 touchdowns in 4 red zone trips against Baylor. And really only one of them Baylor had a shot to get off the field. And it was one where, once again, Baylor's best player is not making a play, like Devin Bobby not making that play on Jordan Dwyer and giving up a touchdown, or at least not tackling Dwyer at the 2-yard line, gives them a touchdown right before halftime. And then you kind of know they're going to score another touchdown out of the half. Like those type of plays are significant, and Baylor hasn't made enough of them. So we'll see if something changes, but the bet on that, very, very low. The expectations there are, since he's going to score a lot in the red zone.
You just brought up an interesting point, and something I've thought about this season, and it's Baylor's decision when they have the opportunity to get the ball at the beginning of the game or at halftime or at the beginning of the third quarter. At this point, I'm not giving any team the opportunity to get a score at the end of the half and then score right back at the beginning of the second half. And I know that you want to be able to score first, but if the team defers or if you win the toss, just take the ball at the second half, because that is a backbreaker. Like if you know your defense is probably going to give up a touchdown on the last possession in the first half, and I know that like you don't want to think that way, but you know that then they're going to turn around and get the ball to begin the third quarter. That is a huge stat. And like out of all the statistics that are measured or not measured, that middle 8 is such a big part of college football. And so if I'm going in this game and I know, hey, I'm probably going to give up a touchdown either the first drive of the first half or the first drive of the second half, well, just go ahead and give your offense the ball at the beginning of the second half, because it's inevitable that's going to happen, or you feel like it's a pretty good chance that it's going to happen. And I love the idea of being able to steal back-to-back 14 points. And Baylor's offense can do that. And against TCU, when they deferred, I thought, oh, well, Baylor will, I would hope they would defer. And then they took the ball, and obviously it's only 7-0 at the end of the half, but that killed them at the end of the second half, at the end of the second quarter and the beginning of the third quarter. I mean, that ultimately put the game away.
Yeah, it did by and large. Obviously, the fumble with Bryson was the other kind of pivotal. Pivotal. There you go. Jesus, man, what a day. But I think, man, this is something that the rain was definitely a factor in that game as well. Just being there, like it certainly mattered early on in the game for both these offenses and kept them kind of in check a little bit. But man, some of the throws Sawyer was missing, like the opening drive, the throw to Josh Cameron, like, dude, that's got to be a completion.
Or the one to Kobe Prentice.
Well, and then that's the other one is the Kobe Prentice one. It's
that's
like
a touchdown.
Yeah, dude. I mean, and even if
That's
it's not,
as easy
it's
as it
an
gets.
explosive play. And then you kind of look a little further. I was looking at, it was 3rd and 4 and Baylor's down by 14 points. It was 35-21. And Sawyer takes 2 steps forward like he's going to run. And dude, if he had ran, I don't like saying, if he would have ran, he had like 20 yards in front of him. But if he would have ran, the worst case scenario is they're sitting there at like 4th and 2, 4th and 1 with a chance to go for it. Instead, he literally turns around, does like a U-turn right into the TCU defenders in the backfield. Like there was no way he was getting away from anyone in that situation. It's just like, dude, those are 3 drives, 3 plays right there that might have just completely flipped the game. Yeah. Like you have got to, there's got to be more to it than that. And I even if Sawyer is not running well, dude, just put your head down and go get a couple yards so that you can stay on the field instead of sitting in 3rd and 10. You can go 4th and 1 and actually go for it. So those things have to change, man. You cannot be at this point in the season and not willing to risk your body. Like at this point, like this is it. And that goes for every single player on the team, not just Sawyer, but it's just like, it's very apparent with him because he's your quarterback. He's got the ball in his hands all the time. Like you might have to take a bad hit that you don't want to take. And maybe it, puts you out for a game or 2, but like Baylor needs those type of plays right now because those type of plays become contagious. And those type of plays really matter when you look at how soft or how physical is your team. When they played on Saturday, it was very apparent who the more physical team was. It wasn't even close.
Yeah, and like you live with the missed throws because I think Sawyer's going to bounce back from that. But it's from the week 1 running the football for him. I mean, I don't really understand it. And I understand, well, maybe his foot's still dinged up. But it doesn't limit him to the point of like the play you just described. You were running one way or the other. You were either going to be running forwards or you're going to be running backwards. Well, just go and dive for 4 yards and live for the next play. And it's so hard to sit here and say that. Like, I understand, like, it's not me, but I watch a lot of college football. I've watched a lot of Brennan Sorsby. I've watched a lot of name the quarterback. Josh Hooper, notwithstanding because he doesn't run at all, but in the Big 12, quarterbacks are putting their body on the line.
I mean, Tech almost got Will Hammond just killed against Arizona State.
And
the way they ran him.
But it's also the willingness to. Like, and I love Sawyer because of who he is and how he plays quarterback. This is just baffling to me. Like you're still getting hit. You're still taking hits. You're still running around, but there is a unwillingness to do it when your team absolutely needs you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is my most frustrating. That's the most frustrating thing to me. And it was the same way. And I'll go back to the ball that Bryson fumbled. Bryson shouldn't have fumbled, but I'm yelling at the TV at that moment. You have to keep that football. There was nothing in front of you, and that defender committed to you that whoever the edge was had no thought of tackling Sawyer at all. And that is a problem. Your quarterback has to be that threat, especially if they're athletic enough. And he is, regardless of what might be going on with his foot or leg or whatever.
And it's easy to say Bryson shouldn't have fumbled the football, but it's also like he got crushed by 2 defenders the moment he got the football. Like,
and how many times have we seen that this year?
Multiple.
Because there's no respect for QB run.
No. And dude, this is the thing. Even if Sawyer gets 2 yards on that run, it's better than a 4-yard loss and a fumble and the other team's got the ball. Like, even if you're not getting yards, which again, you just mentioned it, he's having no problem running side to side. He's having no problem running backwards. His problem is he doesn't want to run upfield. Like that's the issue. And it's hurting them because even in like the play you mentioned, that QB draw play, I actually really like that play call. Like, I think that
everybody knew it was coming in that moment. Yeah,
I know, but I think eventually like that type of play does work for Baylor. I know it didn't in that situation, but that type of play does work for this team.
Yes. I didn't like the time of it. Yeah. I did not because it was as soon as you go empty, You knew everybody.
Right.
I knew what was happening because you
but
don't
it's
go
a
empty
useful
enough.
play call down the line. Like, it is something that I do think they could utilize going forward if Sawyer's willing to just say, like, hey, I'm just going to get upfield and I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to find a way to get 3 or 4 yards. Like, that's all you're asking for out of that play. It doesn't need to be a touchdown.
You're looking for a first down.
Yeah. You don't have to outrun anybody. You can literally get to the first down and then just dive and fall down. Like, fine. But like, they need some of that component. They need some of that willingness when he's outside the pocket to just be like, hey, maybe instead of throwing this just complete 50-50 ball or this ball that has a very little shot at getting completed, just run forward for a few yards and survive another down. I just think that type of stuff needs to happen. Unfortunately, we're over halfway through the season and it's not happening. So it's kind of hard to envision it at this moment. Like,
it's a mindset ever. Obviously, there's not a mindset to do it. And at the same time, though, they did the Wildcat with Bryson Washington. I would love to see an empty Wildcat without Sawyer lined up beside him. And that was cool, though. It was good to see. But you also need a threat of a running quarterback too when you do that, and it just adds that element. And I'm not saying to use Walker White or someone else, but like if Sawyer's not going to do it, man, like that's an option. And I'm because it truly maybe it's not the yards per carry for the entire game, but in those pivotal situations, it means something. There's a reason that teams do it. There's a reason that running quarterbacks are valuable. And has he had a run longer than 10 yards this year? I mean, truly, has he?
I think he's maybe got like 1. I'm trying to think back to, I know against SMU, he had a couple like short carries, but I want to say he had like a 10-yard run in which he like was kind of by himself in the open field and slid down, or maybe Samford, one of the, the
troubling part is there. The troubling part is that it's there on so many occasions. And I don't want to say he's seeing it and just reluctantly not doing it, but it almost feels that way because when everyone's in man coverage and they're dropping back and their backs are to you and you still check it down to the running back, I don't know. Like I feel like we're going on about this. I don't know how long we've been talking about this, but I think it's a bigger deal than people are making it out to be. I think this is a big deal for the offense becoming stagnant.
Dude, I think it's a big frustration amongst all fans. I'm sure people are probably appreciating us talking about it. I think there are fans that are very disappointed in that part of the game for Baylor. And I think it's just so apparent that it's hurting them in that regard. I mean, honestly, if Walker White can run a QB power, if Walker White can run a QB sneak and you're in a game where you're running the football well, I don't see the harm in it. Honestly, I mean, if you're moving people up front and you feel like, all right, we need to add more to this, just bring them in for like a play or two. You see it across the country. Kansas State did it with their freshman quarterback. Like you see it all the time. And going forward this year, not specifically in this game, but UCF, not a very good run defense, much better against the pass. Arizona, not a very good run defense, much better against the pass. Like those two matchups specifically are ones where it's like, man, you might be able to move some people with having another quarterback back there and running the football. So just a thought on that I agree with.
Two rushes of 10 plus yards this year.
Yeah.
3 designed runs, 9 scrambles. So compare that to last year. He had all of last year, and truly through the TCU game last year is where he got all of these. 10 plus yard runs, 15 design runs, 23 scrambles.
Yeah.
And we're 7 games in now, and it's just not there. And hold on, the most important one here to me is the first down run. So how often is he getting the first down? First downs last year. How many think you had last year?
I bet he had like 11.
19.
Wow.
First downs this year, how many you think?
I already know he's got 1 against SMU, probably 2. Oh, no, he's had a couple 10 yards, so I would probably say 5.
He has 6 this year, but you were in game 7.
Yeah.
And like that, I think that's just a component of this offense that has been underutilized. And I know you want to say, hey, well, we got Michael Trigg, but like when inevitably teams are just dropping everybody into coverage, run. And so, we don't have to keep on about this, but I think it's one of those, like, the offense's inconsistencies come down to not converting 4th downs, not converting in the red zone. And that's what it is. Like that's where we are with this. And he can impact that directly with his legs.
Okay, so the next kind of area I want to talk about here before we give our predictions for this game, Colt. I would say that the expectation after the bye week was for Baylor to split TCU and Cincinnati. I think most people would say that was probably the best 2-0's best case scenario, but that kind of felt like a bit of a long shot. But most realistic was 1-1, and then you beat UCF, and you go ahead and kind of go 2-1 before your next bye week. Do you feel like that if Baylor wins this matchup, you're going to feel much better about Baylor's outlook for the season? Or do you think it doesn't matter, that Baylor's outlook is still pretty much the same regardless of what happens in this game?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so there's two options that are still on the table for Baylor. One of them, not two options. Sorry, that's not the right terminology. I predicted Baylor to go 9-3. That's still on the table. Believe it or not, through all of this, it's still on the table. It's going to take a miracle, but it's still on the table. 8-4 is still within that standard deviation for me of success, failure, wherever. Like 8-4 is whatever. I'm not really excited about it, but it is okay to win. Have a chance to get to a bowl victory, make it 9 wins, kind of like TCU did last year. Okay. Splitting those games, I mean, it's tough. Like Cincinnati's a top 25 team. I mean, they're 6-1. People are saying, they are a Big 12 title contender at this point in the season. Do they ultimately get there? I don't know if their defense is good enough. Their offense is. To answer your question, I don't know. Like, heck, they're beating teams. They have beat teams this year outside of that are similar to all the teams outside of Utah that are left. SMU's very similar to what they're going to face. Kansas State's FEI, F+, Advanced Analytics, very similar to what they're going to face in terms of overall team. I don't know. I just they could win or lose all of these games. So I don't think one game is going to make my feelings change. I'm just going to have to see the entirety of the final 5 games. If you go 4-1 or 5-0, of course, I'm going to be, okay, that was a decent finish to the season. 5-0 obviously being that most substantial number.
Absolutely. That's kind of where I'm at as well. I think it's just one of those things that's important to reiterate, that I think they are still, if they win this game, kind of in that same boat that they somewhat were in, I would say, to start this year and kind of where they were at. I think they need to find a way, obviously, to get to 8-4. I think that equates to a pretty good season, a fine season, right? Like you're not happy, but you're not upset.
I want to point this out real quick too. So Baylor has played 7 games. 7 games. They have not, besides Oklahoma State, who they beat, all the other teams are inside the top 40 F+ overall. In the last 5 games, they've played 3 teams outside the top 40 F+. UCF, Arizona, Houston.
Mm-hmm.
You play Cincy. So Cincy and Houston and Utah are kind of those but if you beat Cincy, there's 3 other games left on that schedule that you feel like, okay, hey, we should win those games.
And the Utah game's at home.
And so it's so tough because this season's very disappointing. Yeah. And so I think I hate that I'm having to reemphasize that, but I think so many people feel like I don't feel that way. It is extremely disappointing.
Everyone's
very
disappointing.
Frustrating. But it's also, okay, there's 5 games to go. How do you win these games? How does your team bounce back? And there's realistic possibility. I mean, you beat SMU, who is 36, who is ranked higher than 3 of the teams that you're playing moving forward. Kansas State, you beat them. Arizona State, you're a last-second field goal from winning that game. Auburn's still number 25 F+ overall. Their offense, they've had a really tough stretch, but their defense is legit. And so would we all be feeling a little bit different had Baylor not played Auburn in non-conference? And you have a game that you win there, and there's just so many variables for me. And that's why these discussions are so difficult, because if you're really paying attention, there's a lot of explanations why. But is it justifiable at the end of this? I don't know. That's the difficult part.
Depends on how it looks, right? Depends on what games they win. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's you can talk about Baylor having to face Auburn, who people are just piling on. I'm like, dude, look at their schedule. They've had to play just really tough teams. They're not winning the tough games.
Yeah.
But they're still a quality team according to every metric. Every single metric thinks they're a quality football team. They just don't have a quarterback that can throw the football. But I think in general, SMU is pretty dang good. Like you're looking at that and you're going, okay, well, they look like a borderline ACC contender right now.
Yeah.
And so I think all of that can be explained, especially when you look around the country. Like, dude, like look at Houston's schedule, look at Texas Tech's schedule. Like, I mean, what if Baylor got to play Oregon State in the non-conference instead of Auburn and just beat them by like 40 or whatever, like Tech
or North
did?
Carolina,
or whoever it may be?
Yeah,
that's a flip of a win, and that's you're 5-2 going into this game. And I think people feel a little bit differently about the season. It's just kind of crazy how that can all flip things. Again, this season's been disappointing. This is not me making excuses. It's more just kind of looking at the big picture and saying, well, I think a lot of teams in the Big 12 would not be very happy with their situation had they had to play Baylor's schedule so far this year.
I mean, it's a challenging schedule. Like I just went through the numbers. An F plus, if you don't know and you're listening, is a combination of FEI and SP plus. And I like SP plus fine. But you have two different respected metrics that are combined together. To this point, Baylor has played one team outside the top 40, and that's Oklahoma State
and Samford. But
Samford, right? But I'm just saying that the ones that actually go into the metrics. And so then you're at the end of the season, you're going to face three of them. So, for instance, Baylor just played a one-possession game against number 28 TCU, and they play 26 Cincinnati, and then you have 14 Utah. If you can just figure out truly how to beat Cincy, it sets the barometer for the rest of the season, and you're probably going to beat UCF. You have a really good chance of beating Arizona, and you're probably going to beat Houston at home. Yeah. And that's just and that puts you at 8 wins.
If you play to that level every week, which
correct. But I'm just saying, like you play so many similar teams that these games are true. I mean, there's a reason Cincy's a top 25 team.
Yeah.
And it's a 3.5 point line at Cincy. And that's because these games are going to be really coin flip games. If that means at a neutral site, this is a even pick 'em. And then in Waco, it's a 2-point favorite, 2.5 point, 3-point favorite. Like, I'm just being realistic. Like that's what that line tells us. So I'm not happy, but this season, like we saw last year, in a lot of ways could flip. And then if you get an upset in there, like I'm not calling the Cincy game an upset. I will call the Utah game an upset. I think that would ultimately be an upset, depending on what Utah does the next 2 weeks.
He's an upset. Since he's ranked.
But I'm saying I don't think they are Utah. I don't think they are. I'm not saying they're a fraud because I think their offense is really good, but I'm not going to call them Utah at this point.
No,
I can't do that.
Nebraska's pretty mediocre. They lost to them. They also got to face Iowa State in the midst of them losing every single secondary player on their roster.
And they gave up 600 yards to Kansas
and found a way to win. Great, but 3-point win against a Kansas team that has shown flaws, shown cracks, and then you got to play UCF and Oklahoma State. I guess the jury's still out on UCF. I'm still not buying that they're good, but they appear to at least be like somewhat competitive.
It's crazy, weird team.
Yeah, Oklahoma State's just bad. So like that's who they've played this year. So and then Bowling Green, who's not good, and they beat Bowling Green by like 10. It wasn't some sort of, or 14. It wasn't a dominating performance. So I think you're on to something. I think if Baylor had played their schedule, they probably have 1 or 2 losses at this point in the season, very similar to what Cincy's at. So I just think that it's important to kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at comparing these two teams. And I think the Vegas line does matter. Like Vegas is right more times than not. Yeah. And they have this game as a very close game, 3-point game, one way or another, basically.
Yeah. I think the concerning part is for Baylor fans is if it snowballs from the TCU game. But what we've seen, and we've discussed it so often, is that regardless of how you feel about Dave Aranda, this team has never quit in any season, on him. And they've had their ups and downs, but going back to the 2020 season, when have you finished the season in 3-9, right? In 2023.
Although the Air Force game in 2022 was a little
but that's true. I mean, that the bowl game's true. But I mean, even at the end of that season, you're playing Texas into the fourth quarter. The game that was sucked was the Kansas State game, but then you should have arguably beat TCU. They went on a kick with no time. Like, I'm just saying this team has never quit on Dave Aranda. So I'm not there's concerns of this snowballing, but then again, there's that comfort of knowing, okay, this team should come out and play hard. But I don't know how the rest of the season is going to go. But I think that as we get further away from that TCU frustration, that if you hit at 8-4 this season, I'm disappointed because I thought it was going to be better. I mean, I picked 9-3, so like we're talking about a 1-game difference. It's just the ultimate frustration.
That feels different though.
9-3. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. 8. You call them Texas 8-4, not Texas A&M, right? Because that was how you make fun of people. You go 8 and you can win 8 wins. Like it sucks winning 8 games. 9's different, but then you also have a chance to get 9 in a bowl game too. That potential to do it. So I don't know. I think there's the margin for you don't like it, but you're like, if you go 4-1 down the stretch, you feel pretty good about it. And is that still on the table? Arguably. I mean, it's week to week at this point.
Sort of. 3-2 seems more likely. Like 3-2, 2-3 seems much more likely. But
3-2, just looking at the schedule, seems more than realistic. Like, I mean, like I'm not saying that this doesn't just crater and you don't win those games,
right.
But 3-2, you look at it. If I'm picking these games straight up and they're not Big 12 Baylor related, and I look at the matchups and I say, okay, home game, Baylor UCF, and I'm just a neutral observer. Baylor wins that game. At Arizona, I mean, there's going to be more water under the bridge by then. Arizona's kind of like proving to what I thought they would be, losing to Houston, kind of this route they're going, and then Houston in Waco. I'm picking the home team in most situations, and then the Arizona game, if I'm a neutral observer, that's a toss-up game.
Yeah. So that's where it's 3-2, 2-3, right? Because
but like more water on the bridge with Arizona by the time that game's played in week whatever that is. We're gonna know more. Was that week 13? So still have a little ways to go.
Absolutely. All right, Colt, before I let you go today, what is your prediction for this game? Who do you think wins? What do you have for a score?
Yeah, so I'm going for the betting. I'm going over, which we'll talk about that in our betting podcast, but over 67.5. Man, it's really tough to pick a win in this game. Unfortunately, like I see the path to it happening. But I just feel burned after last week because I thought that Baylor was going to come out and perform better, but maybe this is their chance to do it. I don't know. I'm going with like a 42, 37, 38 game. Cincinnati wins. I think that Baylor's going to score points like they have all season. They're actually getting some defensive scores, believe it or not, as much as we've harped on the defense and everything. We haven't really talked about that. Two games in a row they got defensive touchdowns. But Baylor's gonna put up points. I just don't trust their defense to get enough soft. So I'll go 42-38 for this one.
I think that I think last week we all feel pretty burned. And my bet here is that it was an anomaly and that they weren't ready to play. They didn't come out ready to play. They got kind of beaten up by a team that was much hungrier than them, a team that had gotten embarrassed by Kansas State the weekend before, a team that had just a bunch of self-inflicted wounds. And I think we discounted that a little bit. I think we discounted the mental makeup of the two teams. Now coming into this game, you got a Cincinnati team that for the last 3 weeks, they've only played UCF and Oklahoma State. They had a bye week in there as well. That's all they've done so far. They've just kind of been business as usual, number 21 team in the country. Everything, is great. You're a great team. You're hearing great things about you and all this. Baylor, on the other hand, is coming off of a loss that's one of the more embarrassing of the entire season. Probably the most embarrassing loss, I would say, of the season. You got dominated physically, got dominated mentally. I mean, if you're not going to bounce back this week, I just find it hard to believe that you're going to bounce back and kind of get yourself off the mat after losing to a team like that. Is this the week where they don't look soft? Is this a week where they flip it back to how they looked against Arizona State, where they come out and actually play physical and play hard for 4 quarters? This is going to be a shootout. Both teams are going to score a lot of points. Cincinnati's offense is just too good. They're going to score. But I also think Baylor's offense is too good to not score in this football game. I think it's going to be a 1-score game. I think it's going to be a 3-point game. I'm going to take Baylor again. I'm going to take Baylor to win this game. And I think there's a lot of rationale for why you would feel that way, why you would pick a win for Baylor. But I also think there's plenty of rationale for why they're going to get blown out in this game or why they're not going to compete in this game. I just think mental makeup, I think we discounted it last week in the TCU direction. And in hindsight, probably should have taken that into more account. And now in this one, I'm going to try to kind of go back to what I didn't do last week and flip it towards this week. What's the mental makeup of these two teams? I think one team's a little more comfortable than the other team. I think the other team's a little more on edge, a little more backs against the wall, a little more hungry. And I think we might see that this week. So I'm going to take Baylor to win this one, 41-38. Very close game, 3-point game. Yeah. Both teams scoring a lot of points. But Sawyer Robertson has kind of a legacy game for him at Baylor.
And it's very, thinking about that, the way that Kansas State TCU game went, and then compare that to the way the Baylor TCU, very similar, showed fight at the end. Baylor obviously kind of got back in that a little bit more than TCU did against Kansas State. But that was, TCU had they'd won a couple, but Baylor had won a couple going into this game. And coming off a bye week, you feel like, everything's good. We're going to come out. There's a little different preparation potentially. And as frustrated as the fans were leading up to that TCU game, the team had still won two in a row. And it's Oklahoma State and Kansas State, but they had won. So I'm with you. I think that you could come out and see a little bit more fight. And maybe this is the week that they win the turnover battle. I mean, is it coming? I don't know. I'm not going to predict those things, but they haven't this year at all. And now they're -3 last week, and that just piled on to what they were the rest of the season.
Yes, it did. All right. So Colt and I will be back later this week to talk about our best bets for the week. We'll also be back to recap Baylor versus Cincinnati, which of course happens this weekend at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on ESPN2. Big one for the Bears this weekend against a really good Cincinnati team, a team that Dave Aranda called the best team that the Bears have faced this season. So a little more energy, a little more juice heading into this matchup against a very quality Bearcats team. But we'll be back to talk best bets. We'll be back next week to recap it all. But thanks for listening. This has been the Bearcast on Sikkim365.com.
Join Sikkim 365 Premium on a $1 for 1 month trial to read our experts' notes and insights. Know about high school commits, off-season transfers, coaching staff changes, and so much more before the rest. Also, download the Sikkim 365 app on your iPhone today to get instant notifications of breaking news, read up on the latest inside info, easily interact with other Baylor fans on our forums, and get alerts for anything published by your favorite staff members.